So much for that warm introduction. I want to thank Dr. Kay Gilbert and the San Diego School of Christian Studies for the invitation to be with you this morning, to learn, to share, and to build community with each other. I'm honored to be with you, especially during this Black History Month, when we celebrate the achievements and contributions and triumphs of African Americans. I trust that what we say and do here today will be worthy of your invitation, all of you being present here today, and worthy of the Black folks who have paved the way for me, on whose shoulders I stand this morning. And here is the help I need.
If I can figure out how to open it.
It's just stubborn.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
There we are.
And that'll give you a flat surface.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. I also want to appreciate the members of this community who are joining us over the almighty internet. I understand that you are filming this event, streaming it, and putting it on your YouTube channel. I had no idea that I would get such reach, but I'm delighted to be here with you today. So, how do we get to this question, who is my neighbor? I appreciate Kay having briefly reviewed that story with you. I trust you won't mind if I take it a bit deeper this morning. The text that we will be speaking to is in Luke's Gospel, the 10th chapter. And in that text, a lawyer stood up and put Jesus to the test. He said, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" Now, here is an expert in the Mosaic law. And Jesus doesn't make a big deal out of the fact that he already knows the answer to the question that he poses. I'm not a lawyer, but I happen to be married to one. And I asked my wife about this business of lawyers asking questions whose answers they already know. And she told me it's typical of lawyers, even today, to ask questions whose answers they already know. In fact, she described lawyers who do that as good lawyers. First century biblical lawyers had 3 jobs. They were to study and interpret the law, to instruct Hebrew youth in the law, and to decide questions of law that came in a court setting. The first 2 they did as scholars, and the third job was to advise in these courts. This expert in the law, the text says, wanted to test Jesus. The word here in Greek is experiasso. And this means to push the one being tested to unreasonable limits. This lawyer, this expert in the law, was going too far. And he knew it, and Jesus knew it. This gotcha mentality is present with us today, isn't it? Politicians, reporters, and some others are looking for opportunities to say, I gotcha. You're wrong. They describe this behavior sometimes as owning their opponent. Do you ever have individuals push you too far? This hyper test reminds me of times when I pushed my parents too far, or good friends, and they would respond with, don't try me here. Perhaps some of you with Southern roots are familiar with that threat. It's a threat. It means don't try me, don't push me, or you will regret it. I think Dr. Gilbert is from the South. She knows what I'm talking about. But Jesus doesn't respond like he is from the South. He doesn't respond like he is from the south side of Jerusalem either. He says to the lawyer, what is written in the law? How do you understand what is written there? What do you think this is saying about this business of eternal life? Now, answering this question is not hard for this lawyer, this expert in the Mosaic law. And so he rattles off passages from Deuteronomy 5:6 and from Leviticus 19:18. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. Remember, this person's job was to study, interpret, and teach the law. Moreover, the passages in Deuteronomy and Leviticus from which he quotes would be familiar to any Jewish person because they were commanded to have these words written on their hearts, to repeat them to their children when they were walking, lying down, and when they got up. This is as they carried on the daily business of living. That's what they were supposed to be doing. And so, as expected, this lawyer answered well. And Jesus said, do this and you will live. Jesus affirms that if the lawyer keeps the Mosaic law, he will have eternal life. Jesus, too, has done well, because you remember, this lawyer was trying to trick him. This lawyer was trying to test him. The lawyer wanted to see if this radical in first century biblical times would uphold the Mosaic law or denounce it. But the text says the lawyer would not leave Jesus alone. He could have left him. He passed the test. He doesn't seem as radical as people say he is. There's no gotcha here. But the text says the lawyer would not leave Jesus alone. Jesus has not denied but affirmed the Mosaic law. But the text says the lawyer, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" Did you catch the motivation for continuing? He wanted to justify himself. He wouldn't leave it alone. You've dealt with people like that, haven't you? The lawyer wanted to justify himself. The Greek word there is dikaiosai, and it means to declare guiltless, one who is accused or could be accused of some charge or reproach. It means to be acquitted. I submit to you this morning that this lawyer could not leave Jesus' affirmative response alone because he knew he was guilty. He knew he was guilty or could be accused of some charge. Some might say he was guilty of not loving God with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength. But I want to further suggest to you that the charge of which he was guilty was not having loved his neighbor as himself. And you might ask, well, why, Branch, do you come to that conclusion? Because after Jesus has passed the test, this lawyer immediately changes the subject with the question, who is my neighbor? Rather than going away with the satisfaction that Jesus has upheld the law, he asks a question that he hopes will be sufficient to make a detour away from himself so that he can be cleared. He wants to get Jesus onto another topic. Can you see him squirming and thinking, if I can just get this guy onto some other topic, some broader concept of neighbor, he won't know that I'm guilty of not loving my neighbor. Now, who's going to tell him? Jesus knows what he's thinking. Jesus already knows him. And you know that this tactic of redefining a word or questioning its application in a particular situation is not a foreign tactic. We do that today too, don't we? It's practiced today with a sad and indecent regularity. Does this sound familiar to you? Yeah, but what is an insurrection really? Yeah, but what is genocide really? We are here today because the leadership of the San Diego School of Christian Studies has taken up this question, who is my neighbor? There is a difference in the motivation of this organization at First United Methodist Church and St. Paul United Methodist Church when they ask, who is my neighbor? The motivation is not a hidden desire to be acquitted of a charge. They're not trying to be declared guiltless. This organization seeks to build a culturally diverse community of believers. Look around you. People who are committed to loving each other. So rather than focus on who is our neighbor, Jesus lovingly provides a variation on this theme. And he directs us to consider how we are to be as neighbors. How we are to be as neighbors. At the end of this famous parable, the question Jesus poses is, which of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor? But we've gotten ahead of ourselves, haven't we? We've gone to the end. Right, now that was an introduction. Let us review this story. A man who was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho was robbed, beaten, stripped of his clothes, and was left for dead. A priest traveling on the same road saw him and crossed over to the other side. Another religious leader, a Levite, saw him, came a little closer, and he too crossed over to the other side. A third person, a Samaritan, came up to the naked, beaten, and bruised man who was near death, and when he saw him, he felt compassion, and he bandaged his wounds, poured oil and wine on the wounds, put the injured man on his own animal, and brought him to an inn to care for him. And he took care of him all night long. The text says, the next day when he was ready to leave, he gave the innkeeper money and said, you take care of him, and if you spend more than I've given you, when I get back, I will repay you. Jesus then poses this question to the expert in the Mosaic law, who of these three was a neighbor to the victim of the robbers? Now, for a deeper look at this story, there are a number of approaches that we might take. We could focus on religious hypocrisy, couldn't we? We could focus on the lack of consistency in these religious leaders in leaving a beaten, bruised, and half-dead man on the side of the road. There is the likelihood that these religious leaders would respond and rationalize their callous behavior as a result of their religious convictions. And in the cases of these two, it would be convictions related to the law that they had to be ceremonially clean. They could not sully themselves by touching a bleeding, bruised, half-dead body. A second approach that we might take is to focus on the ecumenical nature of the Samaritan's actions. Some commentators focus on the fact that religious differences existed between the Samaritans and the Jews. Jews considered Samaritans pagans, as well as half-breeds. You take a look at your Bible, 2 Kings 17. But the religious differences that might have existed between this half-dead man and the Samaritan did not prevent the Samaritan from offering aid. A third approach that we might use is the theme of ethnic and racial reconciliation. There is ethnic and racial reconciliation in this parable as well, is there not? The fact of ethnic differences did not prevent this half-Jew, half-Gentile Samaritan, who was and is hated by the Israelites, from rescuing this nearly lifeless, beaten, bloody, naked Jew. This person left on the side of the road. Now, this approach is especially appealing to me because I believe in ethnic and racial reconciliation. I've devoted a good deal of my life to seeing this happen. And our country is in racial and ethnic crisis right now. As you know, you read the papers, you listen to the news. Our country is sorely in need of healing. We need racial reconciliation. And as a specialist in ethnic identity development, I've spent 25 years of my professional life preparing teachers for supporting students in their ethnic identity development in public schools. So while any one of these approaches will have valuable insight for us, I want us to look this morning where Jesus did. He looked and directed the religious leader, this lawyer, this expert in the Mosaic law. He directed him to consider what the Samaritan did. What did he do? And before I consider what the Samaritan did, I think I should get something off my chest. With the exception of this morning and your leader, Kay Gilbert, I have always heard people refer to this Samaritan as a good Samaritan. People always place this distinguishing prefix before the name Samaritan. Jesus doesn't do this. Dr. Gilbert didn't do it either this morning. And she's the only one, and I'm 64 years old. She's the only one who has ever mentioned this event and did not use that prefix, good. Thank you. When people in the general population do this today, they are exposing their disposition, their assumption that Samaritans are bad, that there's something wrong with them. And every now and again, you might find a good one, but generally, they're bad. The one that you find that's good is not like the others. The pagans, the mixed race, the half-breeds. Do you know 25 states in the United States of America have what's called Good Samaritan laws? 10 additional states have pending legislation. They have proposed legislation to put in place a Good Samaritan law. The language of the title for these laws perpetuates this notion that Samaritans are bad. And you may say, but wait a minute, Branch. Wait just a minute. The title in my Bible says, The Good Samaritan. And every translation that you will read has that title, The Good Samaritan. Well, here's a news flash. Biblical writers did not use section titles. They didn't separate the words that they wrote into chapters and verses. These were all inserted by Bible translators and editors. And when they write the Good Samaritan, they are exposing their own prejudice. Let us not perpetuate their prejudice. And I appreciate you not perpetuating their prejudice this morning. So what did the Samaritan do? He came to where the injured man was. We may run right by that, but that is significant. Notice he did not avoid this injured man. He did not talk himself out of coming to the man's aid with thinking such as, this is a dangerous situation. This man might have a virus. He might not be all that injured at all. This may be a trick. He didn't talk himself out of it by saying, this is not my problem. He came close to this man. He went to see what the matter was. Secondly, he had compassion on him. The Greek word for compassion here is esplaneth. And it means that he was moved in his bowels, his inward parts. What are the inward parts? The heart, the liver, the kidneys, the lungs. Figuratively, these are the seat of emotions. This kind of compassion is felt deep down inside. It just moves you all over. Maybe your heart beats a little faster. Maybe you breathe short. You're torn up inside. What else did this Samaritan do? He bound up his wounds. He got his hands dirty. Have you ever been so moved by a matter that you felt like you just had to do something? And I don't mean writing a check. I don't mean dispatching some subordinate to take care of something for you. But getting yourself physically involved in helping a person in need. Some years ago, I attended a Rotary Club meeting in El Cajon. I heard a woman tell the audience that while she was listening to a reporter on the radio describe the civil war in Guatemala, in which citizens were being killed mercilessly by the government, she was so moved she had to do something. This woman, Carol Conger Cross, some of you may know her, said when she heard the radio that the government was killing children the age of her daughter, she thought, I can't just sit here in the United States while this is happening. She began taking medical supplies to Guatemala, and she took clothes to the people of Guatemala. While there, she saw the need for schools, and she organized groups of individuals to begin going to Guatemala on their vacations to build schools. When my 11-year-old nephew and I joined that team in 2004, we helped build a dental clinic. And Carol and her husband Dale and their teams had been going to Guatemala for 20 years. Physically, with their hands, they helped to build schools, churches, a dental clinic. Have you ever been moved to get your hands dirty? To physically do the work yourself? Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop of South Africa and a recipient of the Nobel Prize, said frequently people think compassion and love are merely sentimental. He says, no, they are very demanding. If you ever are going to be compassionate, be prepared for action. What has compassion driven you to do? What else did the Samaritan do? He used his own resources, his oil, his wine, his time. He used his own transportation and his own money. It's interesting that he used his own time. It made me think about our fascination with time. We save time, spend time, keep time, redeem time, kill time, lose time, pass time, we invest time, and we make up for lost time. We get robbed of time. We believe that time flies, and time is money. We caution each other not to waste time. Mahmoud, the Palestinian poet, asked a penetrating question. Are we what we do with time, or are we what time does to us? The actor, writer, and film producer Jonathan Estrin has said, the way we spend our time defines who we are. Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, the former president of Morehouse College, a minister, an administrator, an educator, a scholar, a civil rights activist, wrote, I have only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't lose it. But it's up to me to use it. I suffer if I lose it. Give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. The Samaritan also gave up the comfort of his transportation. He put the wounded man on his animal, and he walked. I remember one occasion when my wife's car was at the mechanics. She needed a car while I was at work at San Diego State. So she drove me to a bus stop so that I could get to work. And I took a bus, a trolley, another trolley. First I had to go down to that downtown station on a trolley, and then I had to take another trolley to San Diego State. And I sat on that bench waiting for the bus, and I thought to myself, I'm the one who works outside the house. There's nothing wrong with my car, but I'm the one waiting here at this bus stop. Driving to San Diego State from our home in Chula Vista takes about 25 minutes. The bus and trolley combination took more than an hour. Perhaps I should have counted my blessings. She says, There were buses and trolleys. I didn't have to walk from Chula Vista to San Diego State. And guess what? I had the opportunity to redeem time on the trolley. I could read grade papers, redeem time. So this compassion felt deep in the Samaritan's inward parts, dirtied his hands, made a pedestrian out of him, robbed him of a night's sleep, and put him in debt. Yes, being moved with compassion cost him some money. The commentators are divided about whether he left the innkeeper 2 weeks worth of money to take care of this man or 2 months worth of money to take care of him. In either case, it seems to me that that's quite a big gift for one stranger to give to another stranger. $2 months or 2 weeks worth of money at a hotel. You do the math based on the last time you stayed at a hotel. That's a good deal of money. Have you guessed yet what the critical component of being a neighbor is? Compassion. Esplagnis. How do we cultivate this compassion? How do we promote it? How do we grow this kind of compassion? How do we get to the place where our inward parts cry out for us to take action? How do we get there? Remember that this whole business starts with loving your neighbor as yourself. You know, if you have the compassion that moves you to take action, to get your hands dirty, helping those in need, you know if you're already in that place or not. If you find yourself recoiling when you see people in need, if you find yourself turning your head away from people who are in need, the first thing you need to do is ask God to give you love for your neighbor. Remember that God's love agapao, is a verb. It acts. Let God know that you won't mind if people interrupt your schedule. I guarantee you, if you get started on an important project, your schedule will be interrupted. And the project need not be religious. You will be interrupted. The Dutch professor, writer, and theologian Henry Nouwen has written, "Compassion asks us to go where it hurts, to enter into places of pain, to share in brokenness, fear, confusion, and anguish." Compassion challenges us to cry out with those in misery, to mourn with those who are lonely, to weep with tears those in tears. Compassion requires us to be weak with the weak, vulnerable with the vulnerable, and powerless with the powerless. Compassion means full immersion, he said, in the condition of being human. Ask God to help you have love, to give you love for people in need. Second, we need to ask God to help us to get into the habit of denying ourselves our own comfort, to give up our comfort for others. This is the season, is it not, when we focus on giving up something so that we can prioritize God. I apologize for continuing to take these drinks. I'm taking an antihistamine, and it dries you out, as you know. I'm okay for right now. Do we really need 2 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars? Do we need 2, 3, 4 houses? Do we need the newest iPhone, iWatch, iPad? Who said yes? We're going to pray. This, I believe, is an iPhone 8. And it works just fine. I understand that there is an iPhone 15 now. This 8 works just fine. I'm trying to break it, lose it, do something with it, so I can get some things done. Deny your own comfort. Just do it. And third, share your resources with others, including your money. And some of you are saying, but Branch, I don't have that much money as it is. There's a whole lot of month left over at the end of my money. The critical component to being a neighbor is compassion. And when you get that kind of compassion, When you get down on your knees and ask God to give you love that acts and compassion, you will be able to share whatever it is you have with people who are in need, including your money. Maybe you could buy them the new iPad. We need to put our focus where Jesus did, being a neighbor. Thank you. Now comes that time when I get nervous, because you have the opportunity to expose my ignorance. But go right ahead.
So you have these white cards on your table, and there should be a pen or two also. So write down any questions that you have, and I'll come around and collect them and present them to you. Okay. And I have what I thought was the newest Samsung Galaxy phone, and they just came out with another new one. It's like,
and you don't need it.
And I don't need it, but I want it.
Oh, God help us.
Questions?
I didn't tell you this, but the car I drive is 29 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay, now that's dangerous. That means it doesn't have any of the newest safety features on it. I can rationalize anything.
And it gets me from point A to point B just fine. I don't need a new car. There are better things to do with God's money. You know, we don't have any money. All the money that we have is loaned to us by the God we serve. Do you understand that? What do we have that we have not received, says the word.
Okay, I've got one here that has a cute little picture of a kitty cat, and it says, "Hi, Dad, good speech." You may want to keep this one.
Thank you so much, Armani. Please meet my daughter. Armani, stand up and let these folks see you.
And somebody would like to know who was the author's source of the poem about eternity and time. You read a poem.
Mm-hmm. That was Benjamin E. Mays. Dr. Mays was president of Morehouse College for a very long time, at least 20 years. Morehouse, some of you may know, is a historically black college in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Have you ever considered the need for times for us to be the injured person? Take it from the other point of view.
I know that there have been times when I have been in need and I call people on the phone and they're always busy.
It's because they don't have a new iPhone.
Have I ever considered, read the question again.
The need for times for us to be the injured person. The need for times for us to be the injured person.
Please redirect me if I'm going off on the wrong direction. But yes, of course, there will be times when we are the injured, when we need someone else to be a neighbor to us. And it seems to me if all of us are focused on denying ourselves and helping others, when we need that help, it will be readily available to us. If we focus on loving each other. Certainly there are times when we will be in need. And we pray that there will be God's people who recognize that we need and will come to our aid. Yes, there have been times when I've called and folks have been busy, but there have been other times when people came immediately to my need. I recall just now when I contracted shingles and I didn't know it. I was just in pain and I passed out, and I was having lunch with a number of colleagues, and one of them drove my car home and the other one drove me to the hospital so that I could find out what in the world was going on. If that was not sufficient, please let me know.
Okay, here's a couple of interesting ones. This one is about the Samaritan. Possibly the Samaritan may have experienced being marginalized. Therefore, he identified with being mistreated. Also, possibly someone loved him, so he paid it forward. Mm-hmm. It's not really a question.
That certainly is a possibility. Some of you may know that, as I said, the Samaritans were hated by first century Jews. What some people don't know is that the Samaritans were located in the north of Israel, while the Jews who were not conquered by the Assyrians were in the southern part of Israel, Judah. And some Samaritans are of the opinion, they say that there was a group who did not intermarry with the Assyrians, who kept their religious beliefs and practices. They maintained their Jewish purity. Some commentators call these the real Samaritans. Some of you may know that in another part of our scriptures, Jesus is accused of being a Samaritan. And so some commentators have the position that maybe this story grew out of his personal, having been personally attacked for being a Samaritan, an outcast, a half-breed.
On that topic, didn't Jesus live in the north, Nazareth? Would he not have grown up among Samaritans?
Precisely, and he knew personally how Samaritans were treated, how badly people discriminated against them. You will recall that in another part of our scriptures, Jesus went through Samaria. And his disciples wondered why it was he was doing that. And that's when he ran into the Samaritan woman at the well. and he had an interesting discussion with her. In fact, she said, our people worship on this mountain. Jesus said, as opposed to the Temple Mountain in Jerusalem. And Jesus said there will come a time when you won't worship on that mountain or the one in Jerusalem. There will come a time when you understand that worshiping is worshiping in spirit and in truth, is worshiping God. It's not about a particular holy place in the north or in the south.
How do we slow down everyday life to see the need in others?
Some of you are not morning people. I am.
I'm not.
I think that slowing down business begins with an early morning discussion with God before other members of the family are awake, before things begin to happen wherever you are. I think it begins with a discussion about committing yourself to the God we serve even today. One man has said he prays in the morning before he even gets out of the bed. God, make this bed an altar, and me the sacrifice. Committing one's day to God can help us to slow down. Saying, every person I meet will be an appointed interaction. That is, God doesn't make mistakes about whom we might run into during the day, who we are sat next to on an airplane or at a luncheon. These are divine appointments, and we can use all of them if we recall that God is omniscient. God knows who's sitting next to us and who needs to hear from God today. I begin early. I recall, it had to have been 30 years ago, Millie Deinert spoke at the college, and she said, I need to get my soul close to God early in the morning to clean off that stench of humanity before I get my body close to any other human being. Before we do that, we get close to God in the morning.
That reminds me of a prayer I once saw that said, God, it's been a good day so far. I haven't been angry with anybody. I haven't forgotten you. I haven't cursed at anybody. But now I have to get out of bed.
And I think that conversation with God helps us to have a better day when we get out of that bed.
This is not a question. This is an observation. We Methodists in San Diego know Carol Conger Cross,
Conger Cross,
and heard that she was motivated to help when they put the men into the church and burned it down. Oh, that sounds terrible. They were in the village that had no way to earn money, so she helped them with clothing, etc.
That is precisely correct. Carol and her husband Dale are members of the La Mesa First United Methodist Church. And after I went to Guatemala and took my 11-year-old nephew and saw the need there, Dale, Carol's husband, said, "You should bring your students here." And I wrote a grant to take students to Guatemala to teach in a rural school to help these children who were in such need. They didn't have pencils, paper, crayons, things that we think are just commonplace and readily available. They did not have. And so I began taking students to Guatemala. I did it for, 14 years. We took school supplies every year during spring break and taught in a rural school, and we took 2 days to travel around the country. After I married in 2006, my wife and daughter began going with me as well. And each time we went to that church that you just described, where the government rounded up all of the men in the village, put them inside a church, and bombed it. It was horrific. And that's why they needed then and still need help now. The women of that village, and Carol helped them create this, the widows left by all those men who were killed by the government formed what's called a women's weaving cooperative. They create woven articles, scarves, blankets, table runners, you name it, and they sell them in order to take care of themselves. I mean, an entire village without men. And they formed this cooperative to take care of themselves. This woman, in my view, Carol Congo Cross, embodied compassion. She is listening to the radio. And inside her, she is so moved when she hears that children are being killed who are the age of her small child. And she says, I've got to do something about that. She didn't say, I'm busy cooking dinner. I've got to get on to something else. This is not my problem. It's so far away in Guatemala. What can I do? She got going.
Well,
and as a result, there are many others who continue to go.
That kind of leads me to this next question. We're facing homelessness, migrants, people in Gaza, the Ukraine. How do you have compassion for so many people in need?
Mm-hmm. I think God wants us to be sensible as well. We cannot all be in Gaza at the same time that we are in San Diego, the Ukraine. We may not physically be able to do that, but we can send our money. We can be so moved that we get up off some of those dollars. I thought, if I had the means, what about chartering a plane for the destination Gaza. And all of us going, not all of you if you don't want to go, but chartering a plane and taking people who were so moved and letting Mr. Biden know that we were going and letting Mr. That's the one, Netanyahu know that we are coming because he is unlikely to destroy, to shoot down a plane load of Americans. I don't have the means to do that. But getting close to some of the people who are living in tents in San Diego, I can do. Finding out what the matter is with them is something that I can do. A man said in my hearing recently that people are living on the street because they want to. I think that is absurd. Living on the street because they want to. I think all people would enjoy the comfort of sleeping inside. My family will tell you, when we have our family devotions, I often thank God that we sleep inside and not on the street. Because that is a reality that we see daily in San Diego. We sleep indoors and not on the street. We have a thermostat that we can make it as hot as we like in that house. There's carpet on the floors. It's just comfortable. I can't imagine people who would trade that kind of comfort just living with a roof and walls for a tent outside. There's something about the society in which we live that might drive people to be on the outside. And perhaps we need to find out what it is that may drive a person to be outside who might say to us, I'd rather be here than inside. There's something very wrong with that. Yes.
Okay, this is the last one. For thousands of years, humankind has fumbled learning to be neighbors. How much more time will we need to get it right?
For thousands of years.
Prognosticate for us.
And you think I know that answer. It took a long time and a lot of selfishness in our society to get us into the place where we are. It seems to me there will be, for generations, kind-hearted individuals like ourselves, like all of you, who want to see real change in our society. But there will continue to be others who focus on themselves, who aren't thinking about denying themselves anything. A car, a house, new furniture. I know a woman, and it is not my wife, lest you think that. I know a woman who has multiple Gucci bags. And what's that other one that begins with a C, I think? Coach. multiple, closet full. There will be people who focus on themselves. And there needs to be people like us who take a look at others and deny ourselves something so that we can help other humans.
Thank you.
That's it.
Please remember to fill out your evaluations. If you don't have one by your seat, I've got some extras up here. Please do that.